Hello, my name is Ant from KWA, and I'd like to welcome you to this podcast on the circle of concern, circle of influence and control. Okay, you may have heard of this before. So today we're going to give you a really quick but good insight into the benefits of this tool. So look, if you're beginning to feel like there's too many things happening around you, or you've lost control of loads of stuff, or maybe you're just feeling a bit overwhelmed that there's so much going on and there's nothing you can do about it, then this podcast is right down your street. People get to the stage where they even become anxious because of the lack of control. So here's a quick and simple tool that you can use on your own at any stage to be able to reduce anxiety. So we're going to take about 15 or 20 minutes or so, sharing a really popular concept with you by a guy called Covey. Stephen Covey is one of the world's best known and best loved educationalists. He's been around for donkey's years, and he's still one of the most widely used theories in the self-help personal development arena. Now, during this podcast, we, because there's more than me, intend to share the concept with you and its origins, explain its simplicity and how it works, maybe give you some examples of it, role model it, so that you can see how it can be applied in areas of your life to reduce your anxiety and that overwhelming feeling of being out of control. So before we go any further, I'd like to introduce the rest of the team to you. Okay, I'm pleased to tell you that I'm joined by Claire. Hello, Claire.
Hi, Anne. It's nice to be here.
Lovely, and it's great to have you as well. And Carlie, both of which are from Change, Grow, Live. Hi, Carlie.
Hi, Anne. Hi, Claire.
So glad you could join me, guys. Claire and Carlie, I've been working with over the past few months and have enjoyed. They've really given me a baptism of fire into the great work that Change, Grow, Live are doing. So we'll be doing more of these together as we go along. In conversations I've had with Claire and Carlie, both of them have found this tool really useful in the past. Could maybe one of you share with us how it's benefited you in the past? Claire, how about you?
I use this tool every day.
Okay.
And when I first discovered it, it helped me out of some really dark places, some really low places. And just helped me to take a step back. So, yeah.
Sounds like a really powerful tool. You've really had some benefits from it.
Absolutely.
Okay, and we'll hear from Carlie and her experiences in a little while too. Look, before we go through the tool in practice, let's explain to you a little bit about the tool itself. So this concept was established, Stephen Covey established a really popular concept way back, I think 1989, I think it was, called the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Many of you out there have probably heard of that. And those 7 habits have kind of stood the test of time. The book sold over 25 million copies. There are courses, books, seminars, all sorts of things that are still as popular today as any of the kind of new theories of behavioral development. But out of those 7 habits of highly effective people, the first one happens to be proactive. And within that be proactive first habit lies this circle of influence, circle of control that we're going to spend some time looking at. Stephen Covey's kind of said people are either reactive or proactive, really. Learned behavior is very conditioned. It's not a constant, it's not something that stays the same. You can change it. They reckon that, when to condition a dog into doing something, they did this experiment where they kind of gave them a tiny shock every time they did something wrong. And within 7 shocks, the dog had learned to be conditioned to not to do something. It's within 7 shocks. What we later learned that a human being can be conditioned within 3 or 4 shocks. It's even easier. So we learn behavior that may necessarily not be benefiting us. So let's talk about the circle of concern and the circle of influence. So I'm going to share with you a slide that kind of exemplifies this circle of influence and circle of control. And here's how it works. In our day-to-day lives, there are many things that we have control over. I have lots of control over lots of things, but there are lots of things I don't have control over. Okay, in my day, in my work, in my home, I don't have control over what time the bus arrives at the bus stop. Sometimes it comes early, sometimes it comes late. I don't have control over the weather, so I don't know what to plan to wear. I don't know what to do, really. I'm not sure how it's going to go. I don't have control over the temperature. I don't have control over what other people are doing. I don't have control over how my boss is going to show up in the morning, whether he's going to be angry, whether she's going to be in a great mood. I don't have control. There are lots of things that I don't have control over that concern me. Lots of things. And as I go around different organizations and different places, the water cooler, and listen to people talk, there are lots of people being very reactive, talking about things they have very little to no control over. This builds anxiety, this builds ill feeling, and people can often be under so much pressure and stressor from all of these things that it brings them down, and they actually start to become depressed or very anxious. The way around this, proactive people don't behave this way. Proactive people focus on the things that they either have control over or things they can influence. So if there's something that's bothering you in this big red circle here, it's really bothering you, and you can do nothing about it, absolutely nothing, then you need to forget about it. But there's usually something that you can influence. So if my boss comes into work every day in a bad mood and it actually puts me in a bad mood, what can I do about it? I could talk to them about it. Maybe they just don't know it's affecting me and other people. I could do something that's very cheery for them. I could bring them something. There's lots of things I can do rather than sitting in this circle of concern and complain to others about it. If the weather is awful and it's not a great summer that we're having, so maybe, okay, there's something I can do about it, isn't there? I can choose to go away somewhere else. If I can't do that, I can choose to wear better clothes. If there's not that, there are things that I can influence rather than just complain about the weather. And this, you can apply this in all walks of your life, all walks of your life, and particularly right now, under these really challenging conditions that most of us are having to adhere to with the coronavirus changing the way in which we live. We often feel overwhelmed with some of the things that we're not able to do. But actually, even keeping within the government guidelines of health and safety, there's some things that we can do to influence our lives. So that's a kind of brief look at the tool. Let's hear from Carlie and Claire on how they've used it and how they've applied it in parts of their life. Claire, shall we start with you?
Yeah, like I said before, I've used it most days, so it really resembles for me the Serenity Prayer, and I say the Serenity Prayer to myself every day when I get out of bed.
Okay.
So God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, but most importantly, the wisdom to know the difference. I say that it gives me a really good start to the day, and it's a really good reminder as well, because I do try to have control over everything.
Yes.
And it can make me have a really, really bad day.
Yeah.
So by just reminding myself of that, it really helps me.
So you generally focus on the things that you know you can have an effect on, and all those other things you forget. But by focusing on the things you can have an effect on actually makes you feel better, because each of those are being reduced, that the issues are being reduced bit by bit.
It helps me feel like I'm doing something.
Yeah, that you're in control.
Yes,
it's great.
Absolutely.
Thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Carlie, could you give us an example of when, I know you've used it extensively in conversations we've had, and you're always thinking it throughout your day.
Do you know what I was just thinking? I was thinking as Claire was speaking as well. Some days I find it much easier to put in practice than others. Some days I can honestly feel like I have very little control. And especially when everything's going on top of me and I'm stressed and I'm anxious or I'm worried, all those emotions can almost affect how much control I see myself as having. But when I come back to the model and then I look at, you know, where can I have influence, then I can almost get a sense of power back as well. And it kind of empowers me to feel like you're not powerless in this situation. Nearly always there is a certain degree of power or control that I can get from anything. It's just how I look at it. So I think where this really helped me was looking at it in terms of me with homeschooling and the kids right now.
Oh yeah, because that's the problem lots of people have right now, isn't it?
Oh, when the schools closed and I thought I've got to work. I'm still working. I've got the kids. I meant to homeschool 2 children. How is this going to be possible? And it all felt very much outside of my control. And it felt like something I just thought I can't do. I can't do my job, and I can't homeschool 2 children at the same time. And the first couple of weeks were really hard, and it was a battle, and I felt inadequate. I felt not good enough. I felt constantly like I'm not working hard enough. I'm not a good mother. I'm not, the guilt of not doing my job well, but also not being a parent well. And actually, when I've looked at this and I've talked through it with my friends and my peers and you guys, actually looking at what do I have influence over has really given me a sense of control over this situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
What sort of things were you able to take control of that were kind of spiraling out of control before?
I think reframing things and saying like, what can we do today, instead of a list of all the things we can't do. What can we do? Even if it's just keeping it simple, one thing's better than nothing. Looking at it in terms of, can my children be happy today? So maybe they won't learn all their algebra or whatever they've got to do, but are they going to be happy? Is the household going to be happy? Are we not going to stress? Can I just let go a little bit? And by me letting go, that actually creates a much happier household for all of us. What other things have I done? Talking to people, actually just saying, you know, today's a bad day. Or speaking to my peers and saying, you know, my kids are off. I might get interrupted. So in a Skype meeting, my little son might burst in and start waving at the screen. It's all become the new normal, really.
Right,
giving us permission to have that influence and make the best out of the situation we can has given me a much better sense of empowerment and control in these times.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Listen, thanks for sharing those. And I can feel it in your voice when you speak, because I remember when you were first started working from home, how stressed you used to be. Just hearing in your voice how empowering it feels, as it really comes across. So, right, thanks for sharing those. And you know, for our listeners to the podcast, many of them, I suppose, currently today have a lot of common issues. Should we take a look at how this applies and maybe in these coronavirus times? What do you think about this, Claire, Carlie? So we've got a circle here, and within the middle of the circle, there are things that you can control and can influence. And on the outside, we've got the things that we can't control. So, for example, you can't control if others aren't following the rules of social distancing. But what can you do instead? What can you do instead, guys?
We can choose to follow the rules on social distances, and we can keep isolated and practicing what we need to. Yeah,
and it's funny actually. I've got a shop right outside my house. There's a queue outside it all the time, and if you go in the shop, there's still people who almost brush past you. The shop's still too busy, and I'm worried about that store. So do you know what I do? I get in my car and I go to the nearest other store, which is quite a way away, and I go to another store which has really much better rules and much better guidelines. So I actually go to a store further away than my closest store, just to make sure that I can influence my ability to stay safe. Now, it's interesting that. How about the amount of toilet paper in the store? I was in a store the other day, and somebody, the lady said to the lady in the counter, "Hey, have you got any flour in yet? You haven't had any flour in for weeks." And she said, "No, sorry, we haven't had a delivery of flour for such a long time." I said, "Oh gosh, you know what, my kids, they're pulling their hair out and I can't get flour anywhere." You know, I think somehow there are the things that are within your control. So if the children are pulling your hair out, what else could you do without flour that could really put the children in a much better position? Whilst you've ordered flour on the internet that doesn't arrive for a few days, I don't know. There's lots of things that you're in control of, but you can't go mad at the lady in the store because they haven't had a flour delivery. Hey, what about when people around you seem stressed and upset and frustrated with the positions that they're in? Is there anything you can do? Claire?
Well, I can always ask if somebody's okay, give them a smile, listen to them.
Yep.
And I might not have all the answers for them, but I can be a friendly face there for them. Yeah. When somebody smiles at me, it makes me smile right back. So,
absolutely. There are so many things that we can just let go of and just focus on. And when people are proactive and focus on the things that they can actually do, the stress diminishes, the anxiety diminishes, and they take back control of their lives. So that is how the tool works on a day-to-day basis. And certainly you've shared some really personal examples, both Claire and Carlie, of how the tool can work. Anything you'd like to add before we're done? Any advice you'd like to give to anyone using the tool for the first time?
I think it's just about not being too hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
And trying to actually see even the glimmer of influence that we have in this situation. Because even on the darkest days when it doesn't feel like there is much light, there is always a glimmer of light. So
Absolutely.
Sometimes just putting this tool and applying it to those things we feel powerless over can really just make even a 1% difference is a start.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you. Claire?
And keep coming back to the tool. And, sometimes it can feel really hard. Sometimes it's about speaking to somebody else and just having that other set of eyes over it can offer you a different opinion, particularly if you're in quite a bad place.
Yeah.
So, and keep it one day at a time. Keep it simple.
Yeah. Excellent. Listen, thank you both for your help and support today. You've really helped in making it relative to our audience, so I really appreciate it and look forward to making more podcasts with you in the future. As for the audience, look, I'm so glad that you've tuned in to us. Hope it was really useful. Hope you can start to use it, and we look forward to seeing you or you listening to us on our next podcast. Thanks very much and take care. Keep safe and keep well.